Welcome to Flight Path, the weekly podcast for the Tern community, where we share what's new, what's next, and what's coming to the platform you're helping us build. Kicking off season 2, we're focusing on group travel, a big theme this quarter. But that's just one part of our journey. We're also rolling out features for agencies, tackling your most requested updates, and yes, shipping product updates every single week. So join Tern's R&D leadership team, Molly, our head of product, David, Tern CEO and co-founder, and Brad, head of design, as well as an occasional special guest, as we bring you into the loop on everything happening at Tern. We're proud to be the only travel technology platform committed to weekly releases, and we couldn't do it without this incredible, engaged community. This podcast is for you, to keep you informed, inspired, and a part of the process. So if you're ready to stay connected with the latest from Tern, hit subscribe and join us every Friday on Flight Path. Let's keep building Tern together. Welcome back to the Flight Path podcast, everybody. My name is David, CEO and co-founder, and as always, I am joined by Brad, our head of design, and Molly, our head of product, and we're talking about all the exciting things that happened in the world of Tern this week. Before we jump into our kind of intro segment, which is the week in review, I've got a couple kind of quick announcements that I want to make sure everyone is aware of. The biggest one is that we have one of our big launch webinars coming up next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're listening to this anytime between Friday, October 18th and the next Wednesday, you should go and you should register for that webinar. We're going to be going really deep into not only what Tern has shipped over the past couple months, but also how that ties into this bigger vision that we have for the future of travel technology. So regardless of if you're an agency owner or an advisor, it's going to be one that you definitely do not want to miss. So we'll put a link in the show notes. Make sure you register, share that with friends. And we're going to be doing something kind of special on this one. You know, it's really fun, I think, to attend these live. You get to feel the energy, you get to see the chat. And so to kind of incentivize folks tuning in for the actual webinar the day of real time, we'll be giving away a $500 Southwest gift card to somebody that is attending live. So a little extra incentive for you if you are on the fence. It's definitely worthwhile. So with the, I guess one more housekeeping is if you haven't already, subscribe, click the like button. Drop us a comment if you've got questions, thoughts. We're going to do a section later in the podcast of like questions that we've gotten this week. And so if you have questions that you want to hear us talk about, go ahead and either send those to us, put in the comments, whatever works, and we will answer them here on the pod. All right, Brad, we're going to kick off with the week in review. How have things been this week?
It's been great. I need to catch up. You heard the word webinar and you were like 1.5x talking track. So we're going fast. And I'm like, woo, okay. Week has been really fun. We've been ironing out a bunch of details on an upcoming project on being able to schedule emails to send. We know this is like a really important thing for a lot of advisors who are working off hours, and you don't want your clients to be getting an email at 2 a.m. because it doesn't maybe feel like the most professional thing, or you don't want to wake them up in the middle of the night. So making some progress on that. Hopefully we'll have that out here within the next couple weeks. And then starting to dive into working at some details around collecting payments, like from an agency level, and facilitating your agents to be able to collect payments. Way more to come on that in the future. I think Molly kind of hinted at it last week, but there's a lot to learn there, and that's what I've been spending my time on.
Wow. Exciting. Can't wait to dig into, especially the payments part in future episodes. But Molly, what's your week look like?
Yeah, well, 4-day work week here at Tern, which I always joke just means 5 days worth of work in 4 days. So it's been a lot, but a lot of good stuff. My life has been just so much testing and auditing for the big email and calendar migration that we've mentioned. I also had alluded to it on my product update this past week. So yeah, just a lot there. There was also some fun testing and release of the pre-travel itinerary day that we'll do a little project highlight on this week, but that was highlight of the week for sure, the reception to that. And then as Brad said, just a lot to dig into for future projects. So really the next set of phasing around group travel. We're starting development on group travel next week. So there's a lot to do to just make sure each piece is ready to go. And then along with that, there's the concept of, collecting payments for trips, and a lot more to come there, but a lot of research. It's apparently when you start to take on fintech stuff, or financial technology is kind of the fintech is the buzzword, but there's a lot involved there. So there's every single week, that's like a big chunk of my week.
The Facebook, I just like echoing what you said about the Facebook sleuths, right? That found some of these updates, and the reactions and the hype is just so fun for the team. And yes, a lot more to come. Before we jump into the other stuff, my week, I think is I probably am lucky. I think I had the coolest week. I was on a cruise with the Wanderlust community. So we've got a partnership with them. They're kind of an education platform for the travel industry. They have education pathways for new advisors that are kind of entering and starting to build their business for the first time, but also for agency owners who are trying to take their business to the next level. And so they brought about 65 of their kind of community members together for these intensive trainings. And so I was leading a session on AI and how to build kind of custom GPTs, which I'll actually probably doing a blog post and sharing out kind of more broadly with the Tern community here in the next week or two. And then also doing kind of a demo of Tern, also providing kind of support. We had a lot of users that were there, so kind of helping people with questions or best practices and itineraries. And it was such a cool couple days. One, I think just getting out and being with people that are using Tern and feeling the appreciation and the love. And this is something I'm trying to figure out how to bring back to the team, because the number of people that walked up to me and were like, Tern has changed my business. It's changed the way that I think about this. It's enabled me to have the confidence to start to build my agency, is just so inspiring. It's why we do what we do. And so that was really, really cool. The other part was also just eye-opening, I think, to actually experience the challenges, for example, with two-factor authentication on a cruise ship, where you can't get cell service in the bowels of the ship, even if you're docked at a port with cell service, right? And so the challenges that can kind of create. So really eye-opening, really fun, really energizing week from that perspective. And I was also just super impressed with the ship. I think I shared this last week. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. I've never been on a really a royal ship or anything that kind of big. Certainly nothing like Utopia of the Seas, which is the second largest ship in the world. And it was really cool. It totally impressed me. The specialty dining restaurants were super fun. There's always something going on the ship. But also just it was relaxing to sit by on the balcony and kind of watch the world go by. The internet was super impressive. It was far exceeding my expectations. So pretty fun week. And maybe that's a good kind of segue into, we love to connect with users, or if you're somebody listening, you're not yet using Tern, come to an event and we'd love to meet you in person. The next events we're going to is we've got Cruise World coming up in early November. We've got the Signature Consortium Conference in Las Vegas in mid-November. And then I think we're also attending the Agency Owner Forum in November. So we got a lot of conferences in November, and we'd love to meet you. So that's my very long-winded week in review. Now we get to move on to some big things that shipped this week, and we kind of alluded to one of them, but Molly, I think you're kicking off a pretty big update to the Itinerary experience. What launched this week?
Yeah, so and just a quick note, our engineering team has been spending a lot of time on that email and calendar migration that we talked about last week and in my product update. So that's been a big chunk of just the development team's week. But yeah, the really fun new thing was the pre-travel itinerary section. There were 2 posts in our feedback channel, and it had over 300 votes across those 2 posts. I don't know why I didn't merge them together. They were worded slightly differently, so I've always just been referring them as the 2 posts that have over 300 votes. But yeah, this is something that people just really appreciated in other systems, and we didn't support. And you could kind of use the trip overview statement to do some of this today. But basically, there wasn't a really good way of being able to have a section of the itinerary that wasn't tied to a day 1 or day 2 or a specific date, that you could include things like packing lists and tips and tricks and know before you go, or even things like restaurant ideas and like activities and stuff that you haven't officially decided, like, oh, it's going to be on Tuesday at 3 p.m. And so it basically functions like any other day on the itinerary, but you can customize the name of the section itself. It won't show up as, day one. Day one will start immediately below it, but you can use your library to drag in template items. You can have info blocks that have media and documents in prep for this. So you can really just build it out like any other day in Tern. It works on mobile on the client side. So it really should be kind of a seamless part of the trip planning experience now, and look really great for your clients. And so far, the hype has been unbelievable. It literally shipped, and before I even moved it to done in our feedback tool or posted my product update, it was like all over the Facebook. So our detectives were all over it.
Which, maybe a good plug. Like if you're not a part of the Facebook group, definitely do that. You can search for Tern Travel Official and just request to join. Make sure you answer those questions. Otherwise, we've got a tool that will kind of auto decline you. But there's 3 questions, answer those, and you can be a part of the hype for yourself and see this and contribute to the sleuths that are always looking for what's happening in Tern and trying to be the first to post about it. Brad, you want to talk a little bit about just kind of like how you thought about the design, or Molly, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just one more thing. Like, I think for any of these things, we think a lot about the rollout experience and making sure it's seamless. And so the other thing is just that when we launched it, it automatically appeared on everyone's trip on the advisor side. So all of a sudden they were seeing this day that was, not a day right before, but nothing changed on the client side. So that part of it kind of appearing and delighting people and being completely a surprise out of nowhere is also because we knew it wouldn't actually be bad for that to happen, right? Nothing changed on the client side. It's just when you see it, you can start to use it. And only when you start adding items and publish your trip will it actually start to show up on the client side. So for all these types of things, we're always thinking about what do we need to do in terms of proactively notifying or change management and stuff like that. And in this case, it was pretty seamless.
And I think those details, right, are so important, right, and how it varies for each feature. Brad, I know you've been thinking about the kind of design for that feature, but also going into some of those details, right, just the kind of many different things throughout the product, right, that there's opportunities to improve. So take that however you will. If you want to talk about the kind of pre-travel kind of experience, or if you want to go right into that, but enlighten people with your design mind on all of this.
No pressure. I think the last thing I'd add on the pre-travel day is that I think actually the request in Canny was I want to be able to add documents to the top of my itinerary. I want to be able to feature, a PDF city guide or a packing list or something. And we see that request and we ask ourselves okay, but what do you actually want to do? It's not just I want to put a PDF at the top of the page, but rather oh, I want to be able to make sure my clients have access to this information at the top of their itineraries. They don't have to scroll and or try to find it in a specific day. And we could have just said okay, we'll build a way to put documents up there. But instead we looked at, we already had the experience, the way people were already adding documents to not info blocks, other items on the itinerary. So okay, in order to make this feel integrated in the current Tern experience, we'll add documents to info blocks and media. We know people want that. And then we'll allow you to put those info blocks on that first day. So you don't have to learn a new interaction in Tern, a new different way to do things. It's oh, I know how to add stuff to a day. I know how to add an info block. I can just now do that at the top of the itinerary in this pre-travel section. So we're always thinking about that. We hear all your requests, but we're also asking ourselves, how do we integrate this? How do we make sure it feels part of a cohesive experience and not just tacking on new, kind of playing whack-a-mole, adding new things across the product. So that was really the main design consideration with that new addition. And then, some of the other stuff, again, we're just always thinking about how we can be improving the product. And maybe there's 2 lenses there. One is from a consistency perspective. As Tern has grown, it's evolved quite a bit. And sometimes when we're working in a new feature, we'll find maybe a better way to do things, like a better layout or a better approach. But we don't always have time when we introduce something better, like the way, say, like filters behave on a table, to go back and update every single table across the product to say like, oh, the filter should all work like this now. But one thing I like to do just over time is to constantly be looking at like, okay, where is some of this debt accumulated where we can go back and make things consistent to make sure, as small as it is, like when you click a filter button, the same thing happens regardless of what page you're on. Or when you look at a table and like the way that, so like a table looks on your phone, sometimes we've used different versions of this and it like will almost break the page or be hard to scroll. And so we're always looking at that, and we've been making improvements over the last couple of weeks. Tables got a big upgrade, which really is to mean that you now see more results per page. They're small, like the cell itself is smaller. We're wasting a lot of space on the page just by adding white space, basically. So that's fixed. And then we joke with one of our engineers, Spencer, that every time he goes like on a trip, he wants like mini projects to do on the plane to like not be bored. And so I sent him a list of things earlier this week before he left on a trip to make some more improvements to tables and filters, and to bring some of those patterns to some of the old places that we hadn't cleaned up necessarily yet. So you'll see more of that over the next couple weeks as well.
Yeah, Spencer being trapped on a plane is our favorite thing ever. We just need to send him on way more trips because we get so much done.
We need like a conference in like Sydney and then another one in like, I don't know, like Thailand, just like send him around the world, right? Just like keep him on the planes. I'm sure he'd love that. But that is really exciting. And I think it's a good example, right, of the kind of investment in the polish and the detail and making sure that like, yeah, we are continuing to invest in that overall experience. Maybe kind of transitioning a little bit, so kind of a new-ish section around the kind of questions that we got. And I thought I would highlight one that I got on the cruise. We were kind of talking about the podcast and somebody had this question. Before we move on to that though, anything else in kind of product world that we want to make sure to talk about before we do that and wrap up with the week ahead?
I just think like for people listening in who like to get insight into how things work at Tern, I just want to highlight like what Brad talked about, I think is kind of unique to Tern, where like him and Spencer just like hop on and pair and just like improve the look and feel of our site together. And like there's not like a rigid process around it. It doesn't have to like go through me. We don't have to put it on our little like engineering planning board. Like I don't know. I just like really think that's kind of cool and unique to Tern of like, yeah, once a week they're pairing and they're just like up leveling consistently the site. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of cool.
I totally agree. It's like this sense of like agency and ownership. Like if you look at the kind of values that we have on our website, like this like optimistic sense of agency is a big one. This sense of like ownership and like pursuing excellence. I think it's like a perfect example of that, right? Where it's like, it's not on the roadmap. It's not something that anybody is necessarily like writing in being like, you know, the tables need to be better, but it's like looking at this holistically and saying, how do we make this a better experience regardless of the device that people are on? How do we make it, you know, so that they're not having to click as many buttons, and like just overall making that kind of better and finding the time to do that as like a fun project when you're like flying, and instead of vegging out and watching something on the TV, like actually improving it. I think it is so special in so many ways. So great call out, Molly.
Yeah. Anything else we can think of to embarrass Brad before we move on?
I was gonna say he loves this. Let's just like gush about Brad and
I mean, telling you that I'm a perfect example of our values, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right, moving on to questions, and we'll try and create space for this. So again, as people are listening, like if you have questions, and it doesn't have to be about product, it can be about, you know, anything like business. I got a lot of questions. We had this like Ask the Experts panel on this cruise, and like I got questions on everything from like marketing to business to what tools to use for YouTube. Like, so anything's fair game. Like we're happy to share based on our experiences. But one of the questions I thought I'd answer on the podcast this week is just around how Tern thinks about a consumer experience. So one of the questions that I got, you know, kind of over the cruise, but we also do come in on support every once in a while, is sort of this broad question around, you know, if Tern is making the life of travel advisors easier, what's to stop us from eventually just going directly to the consumer and trying to become the next kind of consumer trip planning app or experience? And I think that there's a lot of kind of worry, candidly, in the space about this. There's been a lot of history of technology companies being more foe than friend to the travel industry. If you look at like the OTAs trying to really eliminate the profession in a kind of big way over the years. You look at a lot of these AI platforms that are trying to be the digital AI travel advisor for consumers, right? I think that there's some justifiable kind of anxiety around like, how do I make sure I'm picking a tech platform that I can trust and that's actually like really trying to advance the industry? So I thought I would just share a little bit of how I responded to that question on the podcast, because people who are listening may be wondering. It really comes down to our belief that the travel industry, specifically travel advisors, there's a huge opportunity for them to be the future of the travel industry. I think that if you combine a travel advisor and the uniquely human element of lived experiences, empathy, being able to connect with their clients, like through sales, right? Like all those things are uniquely human. And if you can combine that with technology that takes away a lot of what I think has held the industry back, which is inefficiencies, manual data entry, having to like take many days in some cases to build out itineraries to send to your client, like juggling hundreds of emails. Like if you can actually start to remove a lot of that and concentrate the experience of the advisor on the human component, that's like a pretty powerful recipe. Like human plus technology, we think wins over either one of those in a vacuum. In a way that you can't build if you were trying to go direct to consumer. And so there's this big kind of philosophical piece that we have that like the travel advisor is at the heart of the Tern platform. And that will always be the case. We think that not only is that just our belief and our lens on the world, but if you look at a lot of these trip planning startups, you can search Focusrite just did a whole thing about how most trip planning startups that have been created over the past 2 decades have failed. There's been a huge amount of investment and every single one of them has failed. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, without going too deep, like one is a lot of consumers actually like the experience of planning travel. And so trying to replace and automate all that doesn't actually solve a core problem they have. Two, the cost to acquire a consumer is extraordinarily expensive. If you look at the OTAs, like an Expedia, Booking, they're spending an average of $50 every single time a consumer plans a trip. And so the cost of customer acquisition is extraordinarily high. And if you look at AI and this like next generation of these trip planners, like we just don't believe that it's going to be accurate enough and have enough real-time information to be able to make decisions that people will trust on travel. But if you empower a travel advisor with AI that saves them 95% of their time, and you have that kind of quality assurance, that relationship, that trust element, that we think is where it's going to win. So I think this is really important because we are building for the travel industry. Like Tern doesn't have like a plan B where we like pivot or kind of like move over to kind of go direct to consumer. And I think it's really important to be transparent about that. Now, when you think about our consumer experience more broadly, what we do think is that if we can improve your customer experience through your app, that's a win. If we can help provide travelers with a gateway to connect with a travel advisor for the first time, that's a great fit for them. We think that's a win. So we'll have that kind of consumer presence, but it all is going to come back to how do we connect them with you? How do we make that experience better? And I think that that's fundamentally different than a lot of these other apps out there. So just wanted to share that. Again, it's kind of a question we got. And the way that was asked was almost like, I'm kind of afraid to like ask this. Am I going to start something? But again, in the interest of transparency, I think it's important that you all that are listening hear from us that like, we are all in on making you as a travel advisor and agency more effective and building technology for you. There is no plan B. And so we wanted to be transparent. And this also gets stirred up because there's another Tern that was started kind of around the same time, I think a little bit after us, that is an AI trip planning startup, which is really a bummer. And we're in a little bit of who's going to blink first and rebrand. I don't think it's going to be us, but if you see that, it's not Tern.travel. We have totally different companies. You can look it up, totally different terms of service, but like that adds some of this confusion. And so better to be just super transparent about what we believe and who we are and what our company stands for. Molly, Brad, anything you want to add to that very long monologue that I shared there?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, nothing else to add.
Plus.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, we're at the end of the show here. We're looking at week ahead already, 4-day week. So we got through a lot of it here. Spencer's going to finish Tern on the plane, which will be great. And just kidding. But Molly, what do you got going on next week?
Yeah, well, my mom is flying in today. She's our number one podcast fan. And I've been unfortunately getting Tern flight delay notifications for her. So she's delayed, but she's going to make it.
Oh.
And it's so funny. I'll like literally get the flight notifications from Tern because I put all of her information into Tern. And then like 20 minutes later, I'll get a text from her being like, "Oh, honey, my flight's delayed." So
you don't say.
Cool. I'm like up on the game.
Maybe I'll see you at the airport. Like I'm flying in a couple hours too. Like maybe we'll cross paths there.
Oh, okay. Well, Zach's getting her in this way, and then I'm dropping her off. So maybe you'll see Zach.
Oh,
but,
okay.
So disappointed that you have to see Zach.
Oh, Zach, bummer.
So yeah, that'll be really fun having her in town for the week. In Workland, there's a lot going on. So as you said, we have a webinar. There's always a ton to do anytime we have a webinar. And then it's like such a fun day, kind of seeing everyone there live and hearing the hype for the new features. And it's just, yeah, that's always kind of a highlight of the month when we do these webinars. We are starting group travel development, as we said, which is really exciting. There's also just going to be work done to make sure that as we're rolling these things out, there's a lot of transparency around what's coming when and how to expect certain milestones, and making sure that you're kind of strategically starting to plan your group travel on Tern when it makes sense for you. So just making sure there's a lot of clarity as we start the development of our first set of features. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm a broken record here, but we've got the big email and scheduling migration that I'll just have a bunch to do to make sure it all goes smoothly, and fingers crossed that it will. So yeah, big week ahead.
What, Brad?
Yeah, I think I wrote in all caps in our script webinar because that's just like in my head. It is like that is the feature, the highlight, the everything for next week. So really excited about that. Sign up if you haven't. And then also like Molly mentioned, we're actually going to be implementing, like the engineers are going to be writing the code for the first piece of groups next week. So it's been a long time coming. Looking forward to like getting into the details with them as they actually start making some of these changes. And I'm sure there'll be some things we need to refine as we do that. So that'll probably be the two main focuses for me next week.
Yeah, I echo that. It's going to be a full week next week. We've got the webinar on Wednesday, and so it's going to be, kind of making sure the slides are ready and the demos are ready, and like, all the prep, which I'm maybe slightly behind on given the travel this week, but we'll get there. Molly's like, yeah, just a little bit, David. But we're going to get that figured out. And then literally right after that on Thursday, we've got a board meeting. So it's like prepping for that and kind of like making sure that that's all ready. And then we're traveling to this kind of conference on Saturday, which is kind of more tech, kind of financial aspect to go learn. So it's making sure we're ready for that. So it's going to be like pretty full week. And on top of that, continuing to kind of onboard. We had some new folks join again this past week. And so it's going to be full on. But I will say, I know in the Facebook group, again, we watch the Facebook group. If it's not apparent and you're not in the Facebook group, like I'm in it every day. Like we're kind of, Molly's posting in it all the time. Brad's in there, like responding to questions. Like our team is in the Facebook group. We'd love that as a way to kind of stay in touch with the community when we're not traveling to be with you all in person. But there's been a lot of questions, and it's becoming a little bit of a game. Somebody's now instituting a shot GIF every time somebody asks about the timeline for a new feature, and groups has come up a couple times, which is becoming this kind of funny joke. But I will share that we will be announcing the date for the groups release webinar on the webinar on Wednesday. So if you want to be there and you want to get the latest scoop on what's happening and be one of the first to register, another little incentive. And so we will actually have a firm date, which you can see the blood pressure and Molly and Brad rising as I say this, but we'll have a firm date for when groups will be ready for you on the webinar next week. And it's going to be great. So any closing thoughts before we wrap up? Otherwise Brad, go ahead.
I just realized we forgot the most important thing, which was thanking people for Apple recommendations in Las
Oh,
Vegas from last week. I don't know if it was YouTube, Facebook, whoever threw those out. We saw them. I'm sure Molly is so excited to try them all. Any
yeah.
comments, Molly?
I, I'm not gonna lie. Like I was pretty confused at first. I was like, what are these like apple like pie recipes that are being put in the I was like, this is like a bot. And then I remembered the conversation. So yeah, Molly, we've got some options for you.
I mean, I hope that you didn't overbook our other restaurant schedule because it sounds like it's going to be an apple packed week for us in
We're
Vegas. So
we're doing an apple crawl. So we're just gonna
yeah,
cancel all the meetings. We've got a lot of options. It's gonna be Apple themed week.
amazing.
David's just going to go to the Apple store as part of this
But when
fantasy.
you started saying that, Brad, I was like, Apple recommendations. Like, did I miss like a product launch or something? And then I remembered the actual apples.
All right,
All
I think we
right.
did.
We did it. Another great Flight Path episode in the books. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, register for the webinar. Anything I missed? I think we're good. Have a great weekend, all. Bye.
Bye.